Welcome to the Thoughtful Leader podcast. My name is Ben Brearley. I'm a leadership coach and the founder of Thoughtful Leader. The Thoughtful Leader podcast is all about short, sharp leadership advice because thoughtful leadership is good leadership. Welcome to episode 260 of the Thoughtful Leader podcast. In this episode, I'm going to ask you the question, are you a time management problem for your team? Well, you might say, well, no, of course I'm not. I'm a great thoughtful leader. Well, let's find out in this episode. So when I speak to stressed out leaders and team members, I often notice a common theme. Their biggest time management problem is often their own manager. So the provocative question I have for you in this episode is, are you a time management problem for your team? And of course, you might say, no, of course not. But before you answer, let's look a little deeper into this topic. Then we'll look at some ways to reduce the time management issues that a leader can create for their team. But firstly, let's go back to basics and think about why are bosses a big time management problem? Well, the boss can be a huge time management problem for a few reasons. So first, let's clear the air. Do I think bosses are all bad people trying to overwork their teams? No, I don't. Do I think they all have malicious intent, which is leading to increased stress and burnout? No, certainly not all of them. I think even well-intentioned, thoughtful leaders can be a time management problem for their teams. So here's a few reasons why I believe a boss can be a big time management problem. The first one is there's a power imbalance. A manager is in a position of power. Team members often struggle to push back on people with more authority. So even if the team member thinks it's a waste of time, they may do what the boss asks them to. The second one is expectations. And when we give our team members work, there is an inbuilt expectation that we believe they can complete it. This can be hard for team members to shake, even if the workload is actually unreasonable. And that leads on to the next point, which is people pleasing. Team members often want to please the boss. After all, it's no fun having a bad relationship with your manager, so they might accept more and more work to keep the peace. The next is commitment. Many team members take pride in their work, so even when they have too much to do, they feel they are letting themselves and the team down if they fail to complete it all. And the last one I'd suggest is a reason for bosses being a time management problem is a potential lack of visibility. If you're in a busy leadership role, it may be difficult to maintain visibility of the workload of your team. And if they aren't telling you about any issues, you're flying blind. Now, none of these factors imply that managers are incompetent or malicious. However, the nature of the manager's role can position them as a key time management factor for any team member. And there's a related episode here, number 156. Let's dismantle the cult of busyness. Busyness is a common problem. You can check that episode out on the show notes page, thoughtleader.com/260. Now, leaders can actually help their team members manage their time better because ultimately, a leader is not responsible for how well a team member manages their time, but I do believe a leader is responsible for creating an environment that helps their people to be more productive and effective. Now, sometimes a leader also needs to save team members from themselves if they are taking on too much work and becoming overwhelmed. Now, the most diligent team members may have a tendency to overcommit, which in the long run may lead to increased stress, decreased motivation, and eventual burnout. Now, this is not what we want from our high performers. And you can check out a related article on mastering 3 top time management skills. I'll put that in the show notes page as well. So blind spots can prevent leaders from seeing the reality because as human beings, we all naturally have blind spots, which can prevent us from seeing what's really going on in our situation. Now, these blind spots may contribute to the time management issues of our team members, even though we aren't intentionally causing them. So firstly, leaders may have a tendency to believe that no news is good news. In other words, if nobody is telling me something is wrong, then everything must be okay. But this attitude can lead us to be complacent, failing to take corrective action when it's needed. Next, leaders may also find themselves wrapped up in short-term thinking, focusing on the next deadline, the immediate challenge, rather than looking forward and thinking about the future. Now, when we take a longer-term view, we tend to notice that we need our team to be working sustainably rather than being on the edge of burnout for a prolonged period. Now, I also find that leaders may also start to feel helpless in their situation. Leading an under-resourced team with too much work can feel like an unsolvable problem, especially when you have your own boss putting pressure on you to deliver. Now, this helplessness can cause us to maintain pressure on our teams, regardless of whether it feels like the right thing to do. After all, what else can you do? And there's a related article I'd recommend you check out as well called I Don't Have Time, Taking Back Control of Your Leadership. So if time management is a challenge for you, check that one out. That will be at thoughtfulleader.com/260. So let's get on to the practical side of things. Now, if you want your team to be more productive and improve the way they manage their time, you need to help them rather than be a hindrance. When I run leadership training, I often come across leaders who say they are under-resourced, unable to find people with the right skills. So then I ask them, has your workload ever been reduced so that because you can't fill the roles in your team? And nobody has ever responded yes to that question. So let's help our teams manage their time and us better. So here are some ideas to help you do it. The first thing I'd recommend is to understand your team members' style. Now, I'm a big fan of psychometric testing tools to help people understand themselves and each other better. Now, I don't really care which tools people use. There are many good ones. The important thing is to take an assessment and then have a conversation about it. These conversations help people to understand their own tendencies and how other people like to operate as well. Now, when you discuss the results, try to relate this back to relevant topics in your workplace, and time management would be one of them. For example, if someone's assessment tells you that the person is likely to be very supportive, helpful, and empathetic, they may fall into the trap of over-helping and taking on too much work that others should potentially be doing. If someone's report tells you that their person is very goal-oriented and task-focused, we need to watch that they don't go into overdrive trying to hit the target at the expense of their own well-being. Now, if someone's assessment tells you that they value attention to detail, then we need to be aware that they may go into perfection mode when actually good enough would be just fine. Now, this sort of information is helpful for the team member because they can be on the lookout for their own potential pitfalls, but it also helps you as a leader because you can keep watch too. And these assessments don't always need to cost money. There's a free one at 16personalities.com, which is one that many people find useful. I'll put a link to that in the show notes page as well. And a bit of a disclaimer here as well. Psychometric testing tools and, style reports and all that stuff, they just give you a starting point for understanding a person. They don't represent the whole person. So you've got to use them as a starting point. So take what's useful and leave the rest. And I wrote an article on this a little while ago about self-assessment tools, how to get the most out of them. And I talk about how you might actually get good results from these tools and not relying on them overly much. So the second thing I would recommend you do to help your team in this area is to observe and be a detective to spot a time management problem. Now, being observant is an underrated leadership skill. An observant leader can spot when things are going wrong and also when things are going right. Now, being observant all starts with having the intention of observing, just noticing things rather than ignoring or overlooking them. You might start to notice aspects like body language, tone of voice, and interactions with other team members and with yourself. Be sure also to pay attention to work routines. Does the person start or finish early? Do they work late? Do they take breaks? Or do they just keep working? Are they irritable around certain people? Do they avoid making eye contact or look uncomfortable when talking about certain topics? Now, none of these signs will tell you anything by themselves, but put them together and over time you might notice a pattern or trend which can help you to better understand workplace stresses or dynamics. Now, if you have a concern, sometimes a little detective work can help too. You might ask trusted colleagues to provide you with feedback about someone you are concerned about, or you might even check in the system when that important deliverable was last edited. Was your team member up until 3 a.m. working on it? Of course, too much detective work can feel like micromanagement, so be careful with how you use the information. But these additional aspects can help you determine whether someone might be working too hard, but simply not telling you about it. And you can check out a related article as well, 4 subtle signs that your team is overworked. That'll be on the show notes page too. The third thing I'd recommend is to help your people prioritize. Now, Eyal, author of Habit Forming and Distraction Reducing books, and I'll put a link to him in the show notes page, recommends that team members should take the time to speak to their manager about their priorities and workload for the week. To do this, team members need to have visibility of their workload, which might come from a system or to-do list. Then they can agree priorities for the various tasks before the work commences. Now, this can be a big time saver because it starts to show the manager how much work there is and forces them to make trade-off choices when it comes to priorities. Now, the only issue with this approach is that sometimes team members won't feel comfortable having this conversation. If this is the case, consider initiating the conversation yourself and stepping through the work of your team member with them. This can help you to set clear expectations and to clarify any priorities up front before work is done. Just keep in mind that autonomy is an important motivational factor too. That is, people find it motivating to have some control over their workloads and how they get the job done. So approach these conversations with curiosity. Ask your team members what they think are the top priorities. As long as you come to a shared understanding, you're all good. And you can go back to episode 80 of this podcast as well, what to do when you have too many priorities. It's a good one to check out. The next thing I'd suggest here is to understand where work comes from. Now, for many teams, work doesn't simply come from the manager. It can come from colleagues, customers, other teams, and executives across the organization. So if you're not aware of where the work comes from, you might find that your team have more on their plate than just what you ask them to do. Now, this is the hidden work that can trip us up. We believe we know what our people are working on until we accidentally find out that another project was dumped on them from somewhere else. Now, you might say that your people should just push back on this additional work, but that can actually be hard to do. So find out all of the work pathways for your team so you can build a comprehensive picture of the demand on your people. Then you can be the one who helps to push back rather than leaving it up to your team members to have the hard conversation without the authority to do so. And the last thing I'd suggest is be prepared not to do stuff. Now, this might seem obvious, but I think it needs to be said. Prioritization is pointless if you aren't prepared to stop doing things. You need to be prepared to make a hard call and focus on just the important few things rather than the many. So here's the thing, if your team has too much work to do, you won't get it all done. Then there's a big nasty surprise where people get upset. At least if you make the call early, people know what to expect. Then all of a sudden you look like a smart leader who knows the limits rather than one who tried to take on too much. So your team exists to help you and you need them to get the work done. Now you might be the boss, but you're actually working in partnership. So help your team to manage their time and effort more effectively and you become part of the solution instead of being a big time management problem. So I'm interested, what do you do to help your team manage their time effectively? Let me and all the other Thoughtful Leaders know in the comments on the show notes page, thoughtfulleader.com/260. Love to hear what you think. And if you need help with time management issues in leadership, that's one of the most common topics that I coach leaders on. So feel free to get in touch and see if we can organize a complimentary coaching session if you think it might be beneficial to work with me. You can do that on the show notes page as well. Thank you for listening to this episode. Spread the word of Thoughtful Leader and share this with your colleagues. I'd appreciate it if you do that. But until next time, keep up the thoughtful leadership and look out for yourself and your team.